They say your worst enemy isn't always the one who shouts at you, but the one who smiles while stabbing you in the back. I never believed that until the day a woman named Karen decided to make me her personal target. And all because I had the audacity to live in my own home, a home that wasn't even under her so-called authority. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I'd finally found peace. For years, I'd lived in a subdivision ruled by a homeowners association, so controlling they might as well have been running a dictatorship. I'd been fined for leaving my trash can out past 9 a.m., threatened because my lawn grew half an inch too high, and even lectured about the color of my blinds because they weren't aesthetically consistent. The day I sold that house, I swore to myself I would never again live under the thumb of an HOA. That's why when I found this little house on the edge of town, a place with an open yard, tall oaks swaying in the breeze, and most importantly, no HOA, I knew it was the one. The realtor made it clear. This neighborhood isn't managed by any association. No fees, no restrictions, no committees. It felt like freedom. Finally, I could paint my shutters whatever color I wanted, keep a grill on the porch without begging permission, and plant a garden without receiving warning letters. For the first month, I was living the dream. I woke to quiet mornings, drank coffee on my porch, and listened to birds instead of the sound of lawnmowers buzzing in competition for yard of the month. Then came Karen. I first noticed her when I was out front trimming hedges. She came, walking down the sidewalk with military precision. Khaki pants, starched pastel polo tucked in so tight it looked like a uniform, and a clipboard clutched to her chest. She didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even nod. She just stopped at the edge of my driveway, scanning my yard like a detective at a crime scene. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the sound of my hedge trimmers. "Do you live here?" I turned them off, surprised at her tone. "Yeah, just bought the place about a month ago." She jotted something down on her clipboard, her pen scratching with authority. "Well, I'm Karen, president of the Homeowners Association. I hope you've received our guidelines. We have very strict rules around here." I stared at her. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. No, there's no HOA here. That's why I bought the place." Her lips tightened until they disappeared into a thin white line. "Every house in this area falls under our jurisdiction. Whether you realized it or not, you agreed to the rules when you moved in. I'll make sure you get a copy of the bylaws." I laughed, awkwardly, nervously. "There's no way. I checked with the realtor, with the county. There's nothing recorded. This neighborhood isn't under an HOA." Her eyes narrowed, a predatory glint flashing in them. "I assure you I'm not mistaken. You'll be receiving the packet soon. I strongly suggest you review it thoroughly." And with that, she spun around and marched off as if she had just issued an official decree. I stood frozen, hedge trimmers dangling in my hand. Who was this woman? And what gave her the right to come onto my property acting like she was the queen of the block? A week later, I got my answer in the form of a letter. It came in an envelope stamped with an impressive-looking logo, Sunset Creek Homeowners Association. Inside was a typed notice listing several violations. My lawn, according to them, was not maintained to community standards. My trash bin was visible from the street. My porch light was non-compliant with approved color temperatures. At the bottom was the kicker, $250 in fines due in 14 days. I laughed out loud when I read it. This had to be a scam. I didn't owe a dime to anyone, let alone some fake HOA. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. But Karen didn't go away. She began showing up more frequently, striding past my property every afternoon, snapping pictures with her phone, and scribbling furious notes onto that clipboard. If I was outside, she'd make passive-aggressive comments. "That's not the right kind of mulch. We don't allow vehicles parked overnight in driveways. Trash pickup is Tuesday, not Wednesday." Each time I reminded her, "There is no HOA here. Stop bothering me." But she wouldn't stop. She escalated. One day I caught her arguing with a delivery driver who had pulled into my driveway. She told him he wasn't allowed to park there without HOA approval. The poor guy looked, bewildered, glancing at me as if to ask, "Is this real?" I had to step in, telling him to ignore her. Another time, she parked her own car across the end of my driveway and refused to move until I scheduled a compliance meeting. I ended up calling the police, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. The officer shrugged, saying unless she trespassed again, there wasn't much they could do. That night I sat at my kitchen table seething. Who did this woman think she was? I pulled up the county records again, scrolling through deed restrictions, zoning maps, subdivision filings, and there it was in black and white. No homeowners association registered for my neighborhood. None, zero. Legally, Karen's so-called HOA didn't exist. The next day I confronted her directly. She was out front again, photographing my yard like she was building a case file. "Karen," I snapped, walking down the steps. "This has to stop. There is no HOA. I've checked the county records. You have no authority here. If you step foot on my property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Her cheeks flushed crimson. For a moment, I thought she might scream. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dripping with menace. "Oh, we'll see about that." I should have known then she wouldn't back down. A week later, a manila envelope arrived. My stomach dropped the second I saw the words stamped on the front. Small claims court summons. Karen was suing me. The claim accused me of failure to comply with HOA guidelines and demanded thousands in unpaid fines plus legal fees. She had filed it under her title as president of Sunset Creek HOA. My hand shook as I read it. Fear knotted in my chest. Could she actually do this? What if the judge believed her? What if I ended up owing money for something that wasn't even real? My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Losing the house, draining my savings, being humiliated in court. That night I barely slept. I paced the living room, imagining every outcome. But as the days passed, fear gave way to something else. Anger. If Karen wanted a legal battle, then I would fight it with everything I had. I spent hours at the county courthouse pulling public records. I printed subdivision maps, zoning documents, property deeds. I requested a certified letter from the county clerk stating there was no HOA registered for my neighborhood. Slowly, I built a binder of evidence so thick it barely fit in my backpack. The morning of the court date, I walked into the courthouse with that binder in hand. My palms were sweaty, but my resolve was iron. Across the room, Karen sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a navy blazer, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked smug, confident, like she had already won. When she spotted me, she smirked. As she walked past, she leaned down and whispered, "Ready to lose your little fantasy of independence?" I said nothing. I just opened my binder and placed the certified letter on top. The one piece of evidence I knew would end her charade in less than 3 minutes. And as I waited for the judge to call our case, I couldn't help but smile. Because Karen had no idea what was coming. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and dust, the kind of place where thousands of petty disputes had played out before mine. The judge hadn't even entered yet, and already Karen was playing her role. She strutted around like she owned the place, her blazer pressed to perfection, a leather briefcase clutched tightly as though it held the future of civilization inside. She spotted me and gave me a look that screamed superiority, the kind of smirk a school bully wears when they know they've cornered you. I sat quietly at the defendant's table, my binder in front of me, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to steady my breathing. On the outside, I looked calm. Inside, my nerves were a storm. Karen had confidence in spades, but I had the truth. And in court, truth still had power. At least I hoped it did. When the bailiff announced for everyone to rise, the judge entered with slow, measured steps. He was an older man with silver hair, stern eyes, and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen every kind of case imaginable. We all sat down, the shuffle of papers echoing through the quiet room. Case number 3247, the clerk read, Sunset Creek Homeowners Association versus my name. Karen's name rang out confidently as plaintiff. Mine sounded almost muted, but I gripped the edge of the table, reminding myself why I was there. The judge glanced at the file before him. "All right, Ms. Karen, as the plaintiff, you may begin." Karen stood with the self-importance of a politician at a rally. She carried a stack of papers to the podium, cleared her throat dramatically, and launched into her opening statement. Your Honor, she began, her voice sweetened with false authority. I come before you today on behalf of the Sunset Creek Homeowners Association, an organization dedicated to preserving the beauty, safety, and property values of our beloved community. Unfortunately, the defendant has chosen to ignore our established guidelines, and his non-compliance threatens not only the harmony of our neighborhood, but the investments of every resident who has entrusted us with maintaining standards. She paused, scanning the room as if expecting applause. When none came, she pressed on. The defendant has repeatedly failed to mow his lawn to our standards, has left unsightly trash bins exposed for days, and has installed lighting fixtures that are inconsistent with our approved specifications. Despite multiple notices and fines, he has shown blatant disregard for the rules that everyone else has agreed to follow. Therefore, we are seeking judgment for unpaid fines totaling $3,500, along with legal fees. She slid her papers dramatically across the judge's desk, then returned to her seat, her chin held high. The smugness on her face made my stomach churn. The judge glanced briefly at the documents. Thank you. Defendant, your response? I stood slowly, legs a little shaky, binder tucked under my arm. Walking to the podium felt like wading through molasses, every step heavy with the weight of Karen's eyes burning into my back. I cleared my throat, opened the binder, and looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, before I address the accusations, I'd like to submit Exhibit A. I handed over the certified letter from the county clerk's office. The judge adjusted his glasses and read silently for a moment. The courtroom felt as quiet as a tomb. Karen shifted in her seat, trying to peer at the paper, her confident smirk faltering just slightly. This letter, the judge said slowly, states that no homeowners association is legally registered for the subdivision known as Sunset Creek. He looked at me. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. I verified through the county records office. There has never been an HOA filed for my neighborhood, which means the plaintiff has no legal standing to impose fines, rules, or restrictions on me, or anyone else. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karen shot up from her chair. That can't be right, she stammered, her voice rising. I filed the paperwork myself. I've been president of the association for 3 years. The judge raised a hand, silencing her. Ms. Karen, sit down. She obeyed, but reluctantly her face flushed crimson. I continued, flipping through my binder. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have evidence here showing repeated harassment by the plaintiff, photographs taken of my property without consent, letters demanding payment of fines that are unenforceable under state law. She has blocked my driveway, interfered with delivery services, and made verbal threats regarding so-called compliance meetings. I believe this goes beyond a simple misunderstanding. This is harassment. The judge leaned back in his chair, brows furrowed. Do you have proof of this alleged harassment? Yes, Your Honor. I handed over a series of printed photos and copies of the letters Karen had mailed me. I'd even included a screenshot of a text message she had sent after one of our confrontations. You'll regret ignoring me. Everyone follows the rules whether they want to or not. Karen leapt to her feet again, her voice shrill. He's twisting everything. Those rules are for the good of the community. If people like him are allowed to do whatever they want, property values will plummet. There'll be junk cars in driveways, lawns overgrown with weeds, garbage piling up on the sidewalks. Chaos, Your Honor, utter chaos. The judge's face remained stern, unimpressed by her theatrics. Ms. Karen, please sit down. I will not tolerate disruptions. She sat fuming, gripping her papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge turned his gaze back to me. So you're telling me that this so-called HOA has never been registered with the county or state? That's correct, Your Honor. I even contacted the zoning office directly. They provided me with this certified statement. I tapped the letter still in his hands. Without legal registration, there is no HOA, which means she cannot sue me or anyone for violating rules that don't legally exist. The judge nodded, then looked at Karen. Do you have proof that your homeowners association is legally established? Karen scrambled through her briefcase, pulling out a stapled packet of typed rules, clearly formatted on a home computer. She shoved them toward the judge. Here are the bylaws. I wrote them myself and had the neighbors agree. The judge glanced at the papers, then set them down with a sigh. Ma'am, these are not legally binding. You cannot simply write up rules. Declare yourself president and then enforce them as if they carry the weight of law. For an HOA to exist, it must be registered with the county, incorporated as a legal entity, and recognized under state property codes, none of which you've done. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But we need rules. If people don't follow them, the whole neighborhood will. The judge cut her off. That may be your opinion, but opinions do not create law. This case is dismissed. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. My chest loosened. Relief flooding through me so fast I nearly sagged against the podium. Karen, however, erupted. You can't dismiss this, she shrieked, her composure shattering. He's a menace. He leaves his trash can out all night. His porch light is blue. Blue, Your Honor. Do you understand what that does to the aesthetic of the neighborhood? The judge slammed his gavel once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Enough. This case is dismissed, effective immediately. Ms. Karen, I strongly advise you to cease this behavior, or you may find yourself facing legal consequences for harassment. Karen's face was a mask of shock and fury. She opened her mouth to protest again, but caught sight of the bailiff, who had stepped closer, arms folded across his chest. With a strangled sound, she snapped her mouth shut and slumped into her chair, trembling with suppressed rage. I gathered my binder and walked back to my seat, my hand still shaking, but this time from adrenaline, not fear. It had taken less than 3 minutes of evidence to unravel her entire scheme. As the judge moved on to the next case, Karen leaned toward me, her voice low and venomous. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you'll see. People need order. People need rules. Without me, this neighborhood will fall apart. I didn't even look at her. I simply stood, slung my binder under my arm, and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy oak doors closed behind me with a satisfying thud. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Outside, the sun was shining bright against the courthouse steps. I tilted my face toward it, inhaling deeply. The war Karen had started wasn't just over. It had been obliterated in front of a judge. And though I knew she wouldn't vanish quietly, I also knew she no longer had any power. Because now it wasn't just me who knew the truth. The court knew. The record knew. And everyone who would eventually hear about this would know too. Karen's HOA was nothing but a fantasy, a delusion she could no longer enforce. And as I walked to my car, my binder under my arm and the faint sound of birds in the distance, I couldn't help but smile. It had taken 3 minutes to dismantle her empire of rules. 3 minutes to end weeks of harassment. 3 minutes to shut it all down, legally. When I stepped out of that courthouse, binder under my arm and sunlight hitting my face, I felt taller than I ever had before. Weeks of harassment, nights of lost sleep, the pit in my stomach every time I saw Karen's clipboard, all of it was gone. The judge's gavel had erased it in 3 crisp minutes. The air felt lighter, almost celebratory, as if even the wind was congratulating me. But Karen wasn't done. The very next morning, I spotted her standing at the end of my driveway. She wasn't armed with her usual clipboard. This time she had nothing in her hands. She just stood there glaring at my house, her posture rigid, as though sheer willpower could undo the humiliation she had suffered. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, refusing to be intimidated anymore. For a long moment we locked eyes. Then she spun on her heel and stormed away without a word. I thought that would be the end of it, but within days I started hearing whispers from the neighbors. Did you hear what happened in court? Karen lost. Big time. She made the whole HOA thing up. Unbelievable. It spread like wildfire. The grocery store clerk mentioned it offhand when I checked out. A neighbor I barely knew stopped while jogging, just to ask if it was true. Everyone had a story about her. The letters they'd received, the fake fines they'd paid, the way she threatened them with lawsuits if they didn't comply. Turns out I wasn't her first victim. I was just the first one to fight back. One couple down the street, the Hendersons, admitted they'd given her money to avoid escalation. She had scared them into paying bogus fines about their fence being too tall. Another family said she had threatened to sue them over the color of their garage door, claiming it wasn't approved. An older widow confessed she had been so stressed by Karen's harassment that she considered selling her home. It all came tumbling out now, like a dam breaking. For years she had ruled the street through intimidation, bluffing her way into authority she never had. Nobody questioned it, because who wants to go toe-to-toe with someone that relentless? Until me. and once I won, her kingdom crumbled. Within a week, her patrols stopped. No more clipboard. No more photos. No more smug lectures about mulch or garbage cans. She became a ghost in her own neighborhood. I saw her car parked in her driveway, but she rarely left the house. The same woman who had once marched the sidewalks daily with the confidence of a self-proclaimed president now kept her curtains drawn tight. I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the silence. For the first time since moving in, I could sit on my porch without feeling her eyes on me. I grilled steaks, planted wildflowers, even strung up blue porch lights just to rub it in. Every time I flipped them on at night, a petty but satisfying reminder washed over me. She couldn't do a damn thing about it. But the story didn't just end with my victory. The ripple effect shook the whole community. A group of neighbors organized a block meeting, not run by Karen, but by people who had quietly suffered under her nonsense. We gathered in the Hendersons' backyard one Saturday evening. Folding chairs circled a picnic table piled with snacks. People shared their stories one by one, and as each tale was told, heads nodded in sympathy. Eyes rolled in disbelief, and laughter broke out at the sheer absurdity of some of Karen's rules. She told me I couldn't have a bird feeder because it might attract the wrong species, one man said, making the group chuckle. She fined me $200 for leaving my Halloween decorations up past November 1st, another neighbor added, shaking her head. The widow, Mrs. Langley, spoke softly, her voice trembling. She said she'd sue me if I didn't repaint my shutters. I didn't have the money. I thought I'd lose my home. By the time everyone finished, the mood had shifted from amusement to outrage. This wasn't just Karen being bossy, it was bullying. And the fact that she had gotten away with it for so long left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. That night, the neighbors agreed on one thing. Karen's reign was over. From now on, if she tried to pull anything, people would stand together instead of being isolated targets. My case in court had given them the proof they needed. Karen was powerless. Word must have spread even further because one morning I found an official letter in my mailbox. This one wasn't from Karen. It was from the county attorney's office. They wanted to speak to me about Karen's fraudulent claims of authority and her attempts to collect money under false pretenses. Apparently, when you file a fake lawsuit in the name of a non-existent HOA, the law doesn't just shrug it off. I gave them everything, copies of her letters. The summons, even statements from neighbors who had paid her fines. For weeks, there were investigators walking up and down the street knocking on doors. Karen tried to stay out of sight. But once in a while, I'd catch a glimpse of her on the porch arguing with an official, her face red and hands waving wildly. She looked smaller now, stripped of the power she had once wielded with such confidence. Eventually, the news reached us all. Karen was facing charges: fraud, harassment, and attempted extortion. The day she was taken away in a police car, the neighborhood turned into a block party. Kids rode bikes in the street without fear of being scolded. Parents set up lawn chairs and toasted with cheap beers. Even Mrs. Langley smiled for the first time in months. The weight that Karen had placed on everyone's shoulders had been lifted, and you could feel it in the air. As for me, I went back to living my life. But it was different now. My porch light glowed blue every night, casting a soft glow on the lawn where flowers bloomed wildly, unapproved by anyone but me. I left my trash bins out an extra day sometimes, not because I was lazy, but because I could, and every time I stepped outside, I felt the freedom of knowing that no one, not even a clipboard-wielding tyrant like Karen, could take that from me again. I sometimes think back to that moment in court, the exact second the judge dismissed her case. I can still see her face frozen in disbelief as her empire collapsed in front of her. For all her bluster, all her fake authority, all her threats, it only took 3 minutes of truth to bring her down. That's the part that sticks with me. It wasn't strength or shouting or intimidation that won. It was calm persistence, evidence, and the refusal to bow down. She had tried to build a cage around me with rules she invented, but the law had cut the bars clean through. Now, whenever I sit on my porch at dusk, watching the sky fade into streaks of pink and orange, I smile. Because I know that chapter is closed. Karen can glare all she wants from behind her curtains. She can mutter about order and rules in the privacy of her living room. But out here on my porch with my lights shining bright, I am free, and nothing feels sweeter than shutting down a fake HOA and its self-appointed queen, legally.